Freedom Bousbury. She is a self-affirmed crazy cat lady who's been in the animal welfare industry for 9 years, but really started out saving caterpillars at about 4 years of age. She cares deeply about helping not only animals, but the people who love them. She lives in northern Western Australia with her partner, 3 rescue dogs, and more cats than she wishes to disclose, and lives by the motto that we shan't save all we should like to, but we shall save a great deal more than if we'd never tried.
Hi, thank you so much for the opportunity to speak, first of all. I'm really pleased to be speaking after Miles. I definitely have not lived in Israel or anything as exciting as that. But it's sort of the story that I want to tell is really similar to what he was speaking about, so I think that's a really great opportunity. So this is Lena. Back at the beginning of this year, Wednesday, 4th of January, we received a phone call quite late in the day from the ranger in Dowran. Dowran's a town that's about 70 k's further inland from where we are in Northam, which is about an hour or so out of Perth. So we were informed by the ranger that a resident had been in contact with them about a mother dog and her pups who'd been severely affected by the heat on that day. So on this particular summer's day, the temperature in Dowran had exceeded 44 degrees, which is not terribly uncommon where we live. So the pups had been quite severely affected by the heat. One had passed away from heat stroke. So we were asked whether we could take on this dog, Lena, and her 7 remaining pups. Her story's not a terribly uncommon one for us, for all of us, but it called into question for me some core values held by all of us in the rescue sphere. It was an experience that taught me a lot about the importance of analysing whether procedures can be put into place more often to keep pets in their homes and out of pounds, shelters and rescues. So today I just want to share the experience that we had with Lena and some of our other experiences, hoping to encourage all of us to challenge ourselves every day to ensure that we achieve good outcomes for all the animals we come into contact with, and to remember the critical role that collaboration has to play in the success of what we do. And I'm going to talk about some of our successes and how we've achieved them, and exploring a concept that we call the safety net, which is a core part of what we do. Sorry, my PowerPoint's really annoying. So Safe Avon Valley is a small regional rescue based in the Wheatbelt, as I said, just outside of Perth. As I mentioned, it's extremely hot there, so we've got Perth, Northam. This is Dowran, where Lena was from, Surf of the Sun, round about there. So when Lena and her pups finally arrived to us, it was about 10:30 on Wednesday night. It was pretty heartbreaking. So prior to the ranger arriving, another pup had passed away from heat stroke. So they'd been locked outside in a yard, concrete yard, no access to water or shelter all day. The owners had gone away and left family supposedly in care of the dogs. Obviously that didn't work out very well. So when Lena arrived with us, she weighed about 12.5 kilos when we weighed her the following day. So ideal body weight for her was probably 18 kilos or thereabouts. She was obviously pretty overworked looking after what had originally been 8 pups. Fortunately, the pups themselves were in pretty good nick. They were all extremely dehydrated. They all obviously needed subcut fluids when they came in. They were quite lethargic, but ultimately they were not too badly affected. Ultimately, we sort of separated all the pups from Lena, and they all went on to find good homes. We didn't have any major dramas with them. They had some staph infections, some worms. One of them vomited up a sock a couple of days after arriving. So obviously we'd been going a little bit hungry, but nothing too drastic. So they were, luckier than a lot of the puppies that we deal with from these kinds of environments. So that worked out well for the pups. Everything turned out a bit differently for Lena. So as I mentioned, her actual owners were away. She was in care of family on the day that all this sort of transpired. This was not the first time Lena had pups. The local rangers in the area were familiar with her and her owners. They had been actually dealing with her and planning to take the pups in to rescue once they were weaned. because the owners did really want to keep their dog. So we obviously, based on her condition on arrival, we weren't really confident that her going back to that home was the best outcome. But after she'd been in care for a couple of weeks, we had been having further contact with the rangers, and the family were pretty keen to get her back. They were pretty willing to do whatever, they had to do to get their dog back, because they really did care about her. They came up with quite a significant amount of money to put towards her desexing and her care. I was not really on board with this to begin with. I kind of agonised over having to tell the foster carer that the dog was going back to where she'd come from. I did feel for a time that, we were really going to be letting her down. We explored options as to whether we could keep her in for rehoming, but ultimately we weren't in a position to do that because she was microchipped and because she hadn't been surrendered to the rangers. So the owners were young people. They were not experienced dog owners. They were not setting out to mistreat their animals. This just was, lack of knowledge, lack of understanding. It seemed like they really genuinely cared about this dog. They really wanted a second chance to do this over and do this better. So, pretty grave mistakes had been made here, but this was not malicious. This was just a lack of knowledge. It was actually really beautiful when Lena was reunited back with her family. She was a very timid dog. She was happier. She was more confident. She, had a real waggy tail when she went back to her family. And we kind of were taking a chance, but we trusted them to do the right thing because they had really, really taken on board a lot of what we'd shared with them. Obviously, we know that love alone is never enough, but it's a pretty darn good place to start, and certainly that foundation existed for Lena. All right. So, rescue is utterly heartbreaking. Obviously, we all know that. So many of the animals who cross our paths have been catastrophically let down by the people in their lives, be it through deliberate abuse, neglect, bad decisions, or just general lack of knowledge. We take the animals in who have no faith left in people, and we gently rehabilitate them. As a result of this, it is not at all surprising that it is easy to judge people harshly, to be at times hypercritical, and to take extreme care and caution when placing our animals in new homes. We want to ensure that their lives going forwards are free from all the suffering they've previously had to endure. I do believe that sometimes we compromise our animals' opportunities to find homes by being too selective, too fussy, too involved, and unwilling to take a chance. I think it's time that rescue needs a new revolution, and I think that widening our guidelines for adoption is a huge part of this. Obviously, I'm not suggesting that we place animals in homes where they are at risk of harm or neglect. So we must accept that although some homes aren't as perfect as others, they are better than a lifetime in care or months in kennels. As we know, long stays in shelter facilities can really detract from behaviourally and health-wise. So this is the safety net. So we've got networking, education and trust. Primarily, I think really having that trust and faith in each other and in the general community is the most critical aspect of this. So networking, as we know, is why we're here today. I've got a nice picture of some of my cats networking on our dining table, as you would. So networking is about different individuals and organisations coming together to share strategies and experiences to enhance our knowledge and advance our common goal. It is an utterly crucial skill and one we all need to be constantly working on in ourselves. Almost everyone who's a part of rescue has experienced infighting, vindictiveness, communication problems and disagreements. And it is not uncommon for these to tear apart wonderful organisations. I think we've all seen that happen in our own organisations or on the periphery. To a degree, this boils down to personality and differences of opinions, which are unavoidable, but we must fight to overcome these. It is easy to blame others and hard to take responsibility. We are all passionate and strong-willed. If we weren't, we would not have lasted in the world of rescue for any time at all. What I specifically mean with regards to networking to increase adoption numbers is the willingness to move your animals on to other carers or rescues if and when the opportunity arises, which is particularly essential for smaller or more regional groups, just like the one I work with. So we took in around 400 cats last year. We're just not in a position to deal with that many animals ourselves. So as an example, Safe Avon Valley works very closely with Cat Haven WA. Cat Haven is an open admission shelter located much closer to Perth city centre, which has been working hard to be part of Getting to Zero for over 5 years. So as I said, in the 2016 calendar year, Safe Avon Valley took in over 400 cats and kittens. I personally met each and every one of them, and over 300 of them came to my own house, whether for a few days or many months. Our organisation rehomed close to 200 of them, but more than 50% of them were moved on to other rescues, the vast majority of these going to Cat Haven. And when we do this, if a cat or kitten goes to Cat Haven and they're not suitable for their rehoming program, we discuss. We have an open line of communication. If there's a significant health concern or for some reason their vets feel that euthanasia is the best outcome, we respect that call. If the animal can be treated or is not social or is not coping in the shelter, we'll bring them back into our care. And occasionally we take reciprocally, and we will take cats from Cat Haven. I kind of have to be clear on this point. If it weren't for the support of a number of other rescues, so Cat Haven, Safe Perth, Perth Rescue Angels, Saving Animals Matters, there's a whole long list of them. If it weren't for those, we wouldn't be able to exist. The rescue that I'm part of would not have the resources, not have the capability to keep doing anything, and we wouldn't be able to save any animals at all. I don't personally know exactly what the adoption procedures and protocols of each of these other rescue groups are. Sometimes it is really, really hard to pass on an animal, especially one who's been in my care or one of our foster carers' homes for a long time. I really want to see them through to the end. I want to own their whole journey, but that's selfish, that's for me. If I can place them in a shelter knowing that they're very likely going to find a home within a week rather than months, then I need to put my own feelings out of the equation and make that call. Obviously, we know that it's very tricky. Other rescues are, and shelters may not be in a position to take on animals, but if that opportunity arises, it's a very good opportunity to take. And also, we know that if moving an animal on can work wonders for that animal, an animal that's been stagnating in care for months, goes to a shelter that might have dozens or even hundreds of people go through the doors each week, this vastly increases the likelihood of the pet being adopted. Oops, sorry, go through that there. This is my chickens networking. Don't think we mentioned my chickens. There you go. So this is just a few of our beautiful animals, cats who've moved on successfully to other rescues. So obviously moving one of your foster pets onto another group is likely to mean that you won't get to meet the family who adopts them or receive updates in the future, which is hard, as I said, but it is hard for us, not for the animal. They don't know the difference. They don't know that we're not getting a cute photo of them sent to us. It's up to us to put our emotions, which our emotions are incredibly important because they're what keeps us doing this job. If we don't care, if we're not passionate about it, we will stop doing it, and we really don't want that to happen. But we can't let those emotions get in the way of animals finding forever homes. So moving on to education, obviously all rescues, all organisations represented here have known for a long time that education has a critical role to play. As Miles was kind of, I don't know how to go back. Just pretend you saw all that. As Miles said, sometimes education takes a really long time. In Lena's situation, all her family needed to ensure a happy outcome for her was for them to be empowered with more knowledge. Something that I didn't mention about Lena's family earlier was that they were Indigenous people. We, like Miles was saying, with the guy that came into the clinic who was African American with the cornrows and all that, where we are especially, but I think for many people, there's a bit of a tendency to look at someone who walks into your facility and judge them based on who they are or what their background is or where they're from. But if they're coming to you and saying they want to do better, then help them to do better. Obviously, it's easy to say that caring for pets should be common sense, but we know that it simply isn't that straightforward. And I really feel that people shouldn't be denied the chance to have a pet just because they don't have an inbuilt knowledge of what that involves. We all know how wonderful it is to have pets, and we want to share that with everybody. Ultimately, if people want to have a pet, they will have a pet. Despite there now being laws in place in many states and territories that prohibit uncontrolled breeding, and despite the fact that Facebook and Gumtree now regulate their advertising of animals on their platforms, it still isn't hard to find someone giving away a puppy, or to walk into a pet shop, or to find someone who's found a litter of stray kittens or whatever. If we want to seriously do away with the problem of animal overpopulation in our society, we need everyone to be getting a rescue pet. That's how we do away with pet shops and backyard breeders. But if the process of adopting a rescue pet is too exclusive or too prohibitive, people will continue to choose the easier option. I frequently say my rescue pets are not any more important or deserving than any other animal, by which I mean if I turn someone away from adopting and just say, no, I don't, this is too hard, but I know that they're going to turn around and go and get a pet from somewhere else and from someone who might not empower them with any knowledge, then I don't think that's me fully upholding the commitment that I have to animals and to animal welfare. It was there. Oh, that's great. So this is where we must be educating people about what it really means to have an animal in your life. Obviously, I'm not suggesting that every single person who inquires to adopt a pet is going to be suitable to adopt a pet. There are obviously people who are genuinely coming from the wrong place, or who are genuinely not suitable. And not everyone will take on board the advice that you give them, but if you can deliver it appropriately, you are likely to succeed. Again, as Miles said, more often than you expect. Sometimes that's just about persevering or about coming at something from a different angle. If you discover that someone who has inquired about adopting a cat already has a cat and that cat's not sterilised, don't just turn them down and say, our policy is we don't adopt people whose cats are unsterilised. Talk to them about sterilisation. Offer them discounted options. See ways that you can actually change that. So explain to everyone why you encourage and practice early age sterilisation. Make them aware that cats can conceive really young. We all know this now, but the general community doesn't know that. And so that's one of those easy ways of preventing unplanned pregnancy. We all know that sometimes adoptions fail, and everyone has experienced this. Everyone has animals returned to them. If you have extremely stringent adoption guidelines and you have still experienced adoptions that don't work out, it's not because you made a mistake or an error in judgment. Sometimes life just happens. Our organisation keeps in touch with our adopters where we can, and we have quite a low return rate. I have a personal idea of what the perfect home is for a cat, and obviously, ideally, I would like all of my foster cats to go to homes where they're not allowed outside and they sleep on the bed all day and they're probably fed Royal Canin, and all of that would be very nice. So this is Torben. So during April earlier this year, we held an adopt-a-thon. All our adult cats were free to adopt. Obviously, still all vet work done, still vetting of owners, new owners in the same way that we normally would, but no cost to adopt. A local family in town took home 2 beautiful adult cats. We stay in quite close contact with them. They live around the corner. These cats are fed pretty much bottom of the range supermarket brand food, and I often drive past and see them in the neighbours' yards or climbing the trees across the road. I'm terrified that one day I will find Torben, who is just the most delightful cat, in the gutter hit by a car. It's a genuine fear, but I speak to this family quite regularly, and quite recently when I spoke to the guy who's this middle-aged guy who lives in a country town, he works at a mechanic, and he was literally almost in tears when he was telling me how much this cat means to their family, how much it's done to their family to have these 2 cats, and he said you could offer to buy him back off me and I wouldn't let you take him. And it's just one of those, again, like Miles was saying, you see the homes that they're in and the way that these animals are living, and they're so loved, and that's what we really ultimately want. So that obviously brings me up to trust, which, as I said, to me is probably the most critical aspect of what we're doing. This is Red, who is a very mischievous boy, but he's a very good, he lives around the corner from me now as well. So every time we release an animal into someone else's care, for foster care, for adoption, on trial, we eventually have to just let go and trust that things are going to be okay. It isn't easy to do this, but it is unavoidable, and I think it's a skill that we all need to try and work on within our organisations. learning to trust and have faith in people more in order to increase the number of animals who are getting into homes and staying in homes. Trusting Lena's family to do the right thing by her into the future was a really, really challenging thing to do. I was losing sleep over that for a long time, but ultimately it was for the best. She was an animal who already had a family that wanted her. She was in a home where she felt comfortable and safe. It would have been easy to believe that we could find something more for her, something better for her, but why would we bring one more dog into rescue, have one more listing on Pet Rescue when there are so many already out there and this one had a home that wanted her? Sometimes we will get it wrong. Even no matter what you do, if your adopters are police checked and they fill in a 16-page questionnaire and they have to jump through every hoop you can think of, they still won't turn out to be suitable. I don't think that trusting people more will end as badly as we fear that it might. Every day in rescue is an uphill battle. We're coming into kitten season. We all know what this is going to be like. And we're obviously all making the best decisions we can that we believe are for the best of the creatures in our care, with all the love in the world behind us. And broadening our opportunities and our adopter base isn't going to be going against this. So another quick story, Avon Valley is the only rescue that I have really come across that allows adoption fees to be paid via payment plan. It's not something we advertise widely or offer regularly, but we do have it as an option in cases where it seems appropriate. So this is Dallas. We don't have many good photos of Dallas. He's not the most photogenic guy, but Dallas was an 8-year-old Mastiff Cross. He had a few days to find a rescue placement before his owners had him put down due to lifestyle changes. They were planning to have children, hadn't even had them yet. Weren't sure how that would go, so they were going to euthanize him. He was not in our local area at all. I came upon him on a Facebook group that I'm on. A friend of someone who knew the people was trying to find a home for him. I kind of couldn't go past his big, huge, sad face. And we didn't have a carer for him, but we did have someone who could take him on temporarily. She had a week, so we just decided to give it a go. Although he had come from what seemed like a nice enough home with well-presented owners in a nice suburb and so on, he had been visibly neglected, he was underweight, and he had an untreated oral hematoma. So unwittingly I had taken on a chronic ear dog. Not quite as bad as a chronic skin dog, but still not ideal. So he immediately underwent surgery on his ear and went into foster care. He was a gentle giant, as you can, just see. Not socialised with other dogs, not really walked, very strong on the lead, but just a beautiful dog. He got shuffled around between 4 carers in the space of 4 weeks and had to have second ear surgery, but ultimately a perfect home came up, a single, older guy, perfect gentleman. He had a great reference from neighbours, perfect yard, and a kind heart that was willing to love an old dog, not to mention that he was lonely and desperate for a companion just like Dallas. He was also unemployed. So we discussed it at length within the organisation and decided that this wasn't an opportunity we wanted to pass up for Dallas, so we would just give it a go and hope that things worked out. Frank paid off his adoption fee, $25 a week, or $410 of it. There were a few weeks that he couldn't afford it, and our poor treasurer did lose quite a bit of sleep in the process, but we did get there in the end. I saw Dallas not all that long ago. He's thriving. He's overcome his dog reactivity. He's best friends with the Roddy next door, who's one of our alumni as well. He gained 10 kilos. His coat's beautiful. His ear's finally okay. He's happy. He's loved. He's enjoying his senior years. And that's kind of all you could really ask for a dog like that, for any dog. So this was just one example of our organisation going out on a limb with our adoption process. We're generally quite relaxed and deal with each adoption inquiry individually rather than asking for a specific set of information or for the completion of a questionnaire, because I do find that sometimes this can be off-putting to adopters. So again, in a world where we're trying to do away with backyard breeders, the best thing that we can be doing for people is making adoption easy. The world of rescue has experienced several revolutions in the past 20 years or so. The evolution of smaller foster-based rescues and their ability to support or replace the work of shelters and council pound facilities has truly been a paradigm shift, enabling massive numbers of animals to find a second chance that they formerly would have been denied. Then we came along with adoption websites like Pet Rescue, which offer potential adopters the chance to meet hundreds or thousands of pets in the virtual world so they can truly find the one who is most suited to them. We've had the advent of cheap flights for rescue pets so that animals can literally travel to and from practically anywhere to meet their new families. And obviously, finally, where would we be without social media, allowing us to reach massive swathes of the population with just some typing, a cute picture and the click of a button. So all these factors have enhanced our life-saving capability massively, but it is time for a new revolution, and easy, accessible adoption to a broader chunk of the community is it. There we go.
Okay, so we've got a couple of minutes for questions, and they're lining up already, which is excellent. I can see Kim there. Just a couple of things. Yeah, if you've got a question, do please line up for the microphone. And we will be shortly having morning tea. I don't want to mention it too much now, but when you are having your cup of tea and your refreshments, please remember, after you visited the loo, of course, please visit our exhibitors. They've put in a great effort to bring you some products and information that's highly relevant to you guys. So they're just out there, but also note we've got some in here as well. So have a look around the place. But I'd now like to open the floor for our questions. So Dr. Kim Kendall.
Hi. Sorry, I too have whatever's going around. Just a comment, I only work with owned pets now, but my clinic homed out 5,000 cats and kittens over a period of 18 years. We got up to 350 a year at one point, and we found that the only barrier that you needed, we never said no to anybody if they were prepared to chat to one of my staff for an hour about behaviour and litter trays and stuff. If they got to the end of that, then they were probably, and we saw 60% of them back over their whole lifetime. And some of the weirdest owners turned out to be the best. You know, you can't judge people. But my question actually is, where does Superlorin, the sterilising injection, come into all that? Would you just give a female a Superlorin just to break the cycle while you wait for the permanent sterilisation process?
Is this on? Okay. Tell me the question again, because I don't think that I'm even familiar with what you're talking about.
Superlorin is it works in dogs and cats and ferrets, as it happens, and it's a anti-trophic hormone, which means the pituitary.
It's injectable sterilization. Is that what we're talking about?
It's not actually quite chemical sterilization.
Okay.
It's often used as behavioural modification. See what your animal's going to be like if it's neutered, and it wears out after 6 to 12 months in a dog and 3 years in a cat. So you can get it in there, get the story solved, and then continue the conversation. So it's not chemical sterilization, but it just stops the hormones from being produced.
To the best of my knowledge, we don't have that.
Really?
To the best of my knowledge, that's not something that we are using in the United States that's been approved for use.
Then sneak it in.
And you're saying it provides short-term sterilization?
Yeah, it's just
Yeah.
a little implant.
Yeah.
It's not the same as the human one, which is progesterone.
What we've found is that in my experience in working specifically in desexing, and over the last sort of 6 years since I kind of went through that experience of letting go of making people do it, is that most people will just do it if you actually approach. So when it comes to wanting people to spay or neuter, if you have the right message for the right person, which means if that person needs it to be free, then you make it free, and if you approach them about it when they are receptive, then they just say yes 99% of the time. And if they don't say yes, then those are really the few and far between, and we have more conversations and we take our time getting there. So there hasn't been a need for another solution. There was an injectable for male dogs under 6 months that was on the market for about a year, and then it just went off. They kind of folded. It didn't work out. But even that, you would still require sedation to do it. And so for us, we didn't feel like it was better than, or that we felt like the risks outweighed the risks of high volume spay neuter, which we're quite good at. Our clinics have the lowest complication rate in the United States currently.
I had a 0 complication
Yeah.
rate, so it's not hard to get there if you're paying attention.
Sure.
But the specific situation I thought about was the lady that had no money and she had 3 puppies, and you could have given Super Lauren to the female while you waited for her to get around to the next stage.
Yeah, I think that in that situation, though, so we ended up doing the puppies, and that was kind of what she was willing to do that day. We did end up getting around to the mother the following clinic, or maybe 2 clinics later. But that was kind of her, I'm going to give you a little and see how this goes and see if I can trust you. And, we came back and showed her that she could, and so then we were able to get the mom done in her good time. And I think for me, the way that helped me think about these situations is the way that she's taking care of her pets, setting aside the lack of resources and furniture and all of those things that I talked about, is essentially the way that my grandparents took care of their pets. So it's not wrong. And for her to say okay, stranger, try it out on these puppies, that takes a huge amount of trust. And so I don't have any desire to then say, well, what if we do this with the one that you, I'm going to take what she's going to give me and acknowledge her sort of rights to not even engage with any of this. That to me, that her choice to trust me and to take me at my word, even just for the puppies, was enough, I guess is what I'm saying.
And so then the question is about Lena.
Yeah.
Maybe if the ranger had been able to go in after the first round of puppies, it's a microchipping injection, and you'd have been able to stop the next round. I mean, it's just a comment that I don't ever hear shelters talking about, we just go in, we stall, we buy ourselves time and then move on to the permanent solution. Have you heard of Super Lauren?
Yeah, is it working? Yeah. I'm familiar with it. I'm not sure what the cost factor involved is and whether that would be a barrier in some circumstances, and I don't, like you said just now, the ranger could have gone in and done it. Is a ranger qualified to do that, or is it a veterinary procedure?
If a vet says you can do it, anybody can do it.
Okay.
And it's about $50 for the injection, so it depends on how much, and that's way cheaper than any actual veterinary procedure you're ever going to do. Yeah,
for sure. I would agree that taking any opportunity to be able to stop the cycle is definitely beneficial. I think Super Lauren is not broadly known or used, and I guess if there was a movement to change that, then maybe we could find more benefits from that. I think in the case of, in Lena's specific circumstance, if there was a different ranger working there at the time of the first litter, and I think it was all about having a useful ranger on board, which obviously that can apply to anything. If you've got someone that you're working with who is willing to go the extra mile, then I think that ranger, had they had the option to say here's an injectable versus had they had the wherewithal to say you need to do something about this, I don't know whether it could have kind of gone either way. So I think in that circumstance, it was really just more about the person involved and not really going the extra mile, I guess.
What I'd suggest to shelters is talk to Verback and see if you can get them on board with Super Lauren. I mean, it's there. I actually use it for behavioural issues in territorial cats. It's really interesting. I'm up to N=5, and I keep these cats that go next door and beat cats up, and all 5 of them have ended up staying home. So that it actually has wide-ranging effects, but it's there and it wears off. So if they decide they don't want their animal neutered, it wears off.
Thanks, Kim.
Just to clarify, it's not available in the States, and it's a gonadotrophin releasing hormone agonist, and it releases slow levels of gonadotrophin, which interrupts the hypothalamic axis. It suppresses FH, LH, and testosterone. There's 2 sizes. One wears off after about 6 months, the other one is 12 months. I don't know what the cost is. Does anyone know what the cost is? What do you charge your client? Sorry? How much? $50 for 6 months. Is that to you or what you charge the client? That's to, yeah. So it's not available in the States.
Thank you. It's good to have a physiologist in the room. Yes.
Hi, Ros Robinson from Cathaven, Western Australia. Firstly, a comment. If anyone thinks poor people or the down and out shouldn't have pets, I strongly recommend you see a movie by the title A Street Cat Named Bob, and it just defines a lot of judgments and perceptions that we need to change. My question is to Miles. How would you go about affecting change within an organisation where we all judge and we've all got our perceptions? How do I go about changing it?
That's a really good question. So I had to stop talking because my nose was running. There was two more things I wanted to say, but I was like, this is getting out of hand. So I apologize for that. But one of the things I did want to say is that so we all have a responsibility to work on ourselves, and we can only control ourselves to a certain extent in life. But then we also have a responsibility to hold each other accountable for the stories that we tell, for the beliefs that we put out there. And one of the things that I've seen a lot in the US with my friends that are not part of the animal welfare movement is that they have bought into some of these narratives that the animal welfare movement has spun. That, certain people shouldn't be allowed to have animals, that, we should steal animals from people that we don't like the way they're taking care of them. And so that's on us, and not you guys, because you guys are in Australia. But that's on us in the United States that we've spun these tales. So I think that a big piece of it is holding each other accountable, and then using whatever ability you have, given the sort of your status in your organization, to affect change. When I was newer in my career, at a manager level in the hospital that I worked in, I was probably the lowest level of management, and there was I had like 4 bosses, and I didn't feel like I had a lot of control over the team that reported to me, but I did my best. I do monthly check-ins with every person that I support. That's just something I believe in as a manager. And part of those check-ins would be talking to people about the stories that I hear them telling, about whether or not they're venting and saying negative things about clients after a phone call or after an interaction. Beyond that, I think that as organizations, we should be looking at the language that we use on our websites, on our social media, on our printed materials, and in the conversations that we're having with people, and auditing those things for words that are carrying judgment, regardless of whether or not, we have to actually think really hard about it. One of the ones that I talked about in my talk yesterday that I talk about kind of a lot is the term responsible pet ownership. I think that it's an irresponsible use of the word. I think that we're creating a bad guy in that scenario. And I think anytime we create a bad guy in the narratives that we tell, we become the bad guy. There doesn't need to be a bad guy in the stories that we tell. So if we can find anywhere where we're using that language and change it, that's a really good start. Another word, and this I know will surprise some of you, but a word that I really try to shy away from is educate. I try not to talk about people needing to be educated, because if somebody said that about me, I would feel like they were being kind of a condescending jerk. I try not to talk about people in a way that I wouldn't want to talk about them in front of them. And I think that if you can make that your policy, and if you can make that your organization's policy, you'll be in the right direction of changing the way that people in your organization feel.